Hello, my name is Connor.
And I'm Jason.
And you are listening to the Amazed and Perplexed podcast.
So we're jumping back into the book of John. We took a one episode break. We spent several many episodes, going through these sections of John. They're unique to John, and it was good. It's good to get back to it. But this story is interesting. The one we're going to begin with this in this episode, where Jesus heals a man born blind, because it occupies the whole chapter, 40 verses. And so it's interesting. Most of the time, we don't know the fallout. Most of the time, we don't know the after effects of Jesus's miracles. So we're going to cover the first, 12 or so verses today. Anything that pops up to you, Connor, on what we should be thinking about when we read this?
Yeah, so this will be a very familiar story for anybody who is spending time around the Bible. I'm not going to give you full exhaustive picture context, but I will just point out one quick little thing, that Jesus is going to tell this man to go wash in the pool of Siloam, and there is significance to that. It was a reservoir, a spring built by Hezekiah back in his reign, and the idea, one of the main features of it at this time, was that people making a pilgrimage to the temple would use it to purify themselves, to wash and purify themselves before they made their way to the temple. And so there's a lot of significance, obviously, around that, and specifically around how Jesus is now treating it. And so how would you add anything, maybe from the perspective of the man born blind, to give him some dignity and love him as our neighbor?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and the way he's not even asking for help. I don't know. I haven't honestly read it yet. Yeah, he doesn't even ask for help. He's like an innocent bystander. But that dynamic, I mean, even today, if you have sight, imagine going through a whole day without it, and how striking that would be. Now imagine a world where, you didn't have an ADA, and you didn't have people. I'm not saying no one was looking out for him, but his parents aren't portrayed very proactive in this particular story. I don't know how they've been, but this guy's been through a lot, and he's hanging out in a place. And I think the question the disciples ask I think it's probably a pretty common question that was on the surface. And so what kind of, I think the Spirit we'll see in this guy, not in this episode, but in the coming week's episode, I think that came from a lot of rejection. I think he's got grit. I mean, this guy's got some boldness to him, and I wonder. It's interesting to think of him growing up. It's interesting to think of him as an adult and moving into adulthood, and what he had to put up with, how he sustained his own life, all of those things, and then to become. I was preaching Sunday on Hosea, and one of the dynamics is these men and women in the Bible, they become like metaphors to us. Oh, that's Jobian, or that's just like Paul, or whatever. And I was like, I think we need to be honest. And I'm shouting, I think, at this point, but I don't want to be your role model. I don't want to be your metaphor. I don't want to be the example here. And it's funny. It's just funny that how it strikes me as interesting how they treat him. And I don't want to take anything away from our further discussion, but that is interesting. But from his vantage point, standing here, relying on, we would think his hearing would be more keen, and so he's probably catching all of this conversation around him. I just think that's interesting.
Yeah, no, I think it is really helpful, and there's something that's happening now in our city of Tulsa, where there's this new initiative to break up homeless encampments, and we're kind of still in the early phases of figuring out what the whole plan is, but there is a sense in which we can kind of get a piece of kind of understand how maybe the common Israelite would look at somebody who is only a quote unquote burden on society, only a drag, can't really contribute to the broader good, and so it's only like it's not very common throughout the course of human history, and certainly the course of empire, that there would be any significant group of people actually speaking up for the dignity of people who are what the secular world would label as a net drag on society. And so again, I'm not saying 1-to-1 or comparison. It's just something it's very tender on my heart recently I don't know how this particular initiative would work or what the better policies are or anything like that. But I have seen some people's response. Some people have been great about it, some people haven't. Some people's response be very dehumanizing. And that's a very common thing that happens to people who need other people's help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think whatever you, as you're listening to this, the reading and then our discussion as you're thinking through it, I do think that's a great question, is how would I have seen this man? You know, and what would I have thought? Well, that's
the question. That's all I needed to ask right there. You summed it up perfectly.
No, I'll jump in. John 9, verse 1. As he went along, he saw a blind man from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus. But this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming, when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. After saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. This word means sent. So the man went, he washed, and came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg? Some claimed that he was. Others said, No, he only looks like him. But he himself insisted, I am the man. How then were your eyes opened? They asked. He replied, The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see. Where is this man? They asked him. I don't know, he said. It's a funny place to end, but we're going to conclude there. Lots to discuss.
Nobody can read past that.
That's right. Yeah, don't do any free reading on your own. If you're studying the Bible and we find out, you're in trouble. So, what jumps out at you? What amazes you about this?
Now the big pope, the big 8th century pope hat you've been wearing, Jason, is making a lot more sense. Anyways, okay. So what amazes me, I love this. There's so much good here. In this initiative, the question that disciples ask, I love how wrong it is, how they don't give any, I love the fact that they ask this question preconceiving that these could be the only possible solutions.
Right.
And there is such a, they fundamentally do not get a lot of the bigger story of what God is doing with humanity, and how, they're missing a big piece here. And in the crossfire, this man could very easily, and I think there's some parallels here with the woman caught in adultery in John 8. John 7? John 8? I don't remember. Doesn't matter.
Right, John 8.
John 8. Yeah. Time is a flat circle. So is the Bible. It's all circle. It's all black hole. Anyways, there's some parallels here with the woman caught in adultery. I'm so compelled, because it'd be so easy for this man to get caught in the crossfire of some broad theological point, using his healing solely as a way for Jesus to get his point across, and this or that, and there is certainly some of that. But the fact that Jesus puts the spitty mud in his eyes, and at that point he's not healed, and he tells him to go to the pool of Siloam, and then when he comes back he's healed. And so this man, who is basically seen as less than by the people walking and talking with Jesus every single day, is part of his own healing. And that is just incredibly beautiful. It'd be so easy if it was just one of the circumstances, because Jesus does heal blind people in lots of different ways. If it just been Jesus snaps his fingers and he's healed, or there is just the eye washing, or just the whatever. It'd be so easy for that to be the case, and then they just go on their way, and there's no addressing of the purity of what this healing says about the man. But the fact that Jesus wants for this man to take part in his own healing is just amazing to me.
I love that. And I think that really is, to me, the most amazing piece of this, is that that dynamic of the why. Why would you do this? Why not just snap your fingers? So I think that is fascinating. That I like the way you put that. He's involved in his own miracle there. I think it's equally amazing that so they're having this discussion, and if it ended in verse 5, you wouldn't, you might think it's weird that this guy was simply an object lesson, they move on. But verse 5 doesn't lead you to think, what he said before, they're going to heal this guy. Mm-hmm. The guy hasn't asked. I think of other times where, the guy has to ask, and maybe multiple times have to ask, this guy seems to be minding his own business. And Jesus, it's just amazing to have that much power and to handle it so casually.
Yeah.
Well, not to draw attention, to be like,
sure.
Hey guys, I'm doing this here.
I mean, I love the juxtaposition of, you can imagine this grand statement. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world.
Yeah.
Right into the ground.
Exactly
that
right.
is so funny, and it's so Jesus, because Jesus is God, and he's this grand new presence, and he is the light of the world. He's all these magnificent things, but he's also in the dirt and in the mud, and he's making his own mud amongst them. And so I'm so compelled by that as somebody who wants to speak of the higher things, to live out the higher things, to be to see the world as God sees it, but also not be so caught up in this other realm that I am not afraid of getting in the mud or making my own mud for myself.
Yeah. I do think that is such an interesting dynamic, just that dynamic of doing this. I'm like, is there any pattern? And I just don't know. I don't know if you know, but is there any local trend that, hey, if you want DIY miracle, where it's I knew a guy down in this town that, that he put some mud on his eyes, and what's you have this odd visual that's created. Then you have literally, if you're assuming dry ground, how much spit does it take to make that? That is interesting. That's just really interesting. But to encase this much power, this guy has never seen a thing. He was literally born blind, and they think enough about it that they say it. They didn't have to tell us when he became blind. But this is about to change every little bit of his life, and all that power contained in this casual. What honestly, I was taught spitting was horrible. As a kid, it's spitting was gross,
Yeah.
And so it's still. That's an interesting piece of this.
It's funny. We're also recording this the week after a couple, in several different football games. A couple of different guys got kicked out because they spit at somebody.
That is true.
And so this is one of those areas where there is I do think there is spit was not clean for them. Spit was not there wasn't I think there's more going on here with the actual mud, but it's not they have a whole view. You wouldn't, if you got teleported 2,000 years ago to Jerusalem, you wouldn't be instead of having some sort of green, you wouldn't be right into their face. That's not
exactly.
That's not high. What I think, what I do wonder, I think there's a lot of things going on, and I'd be interested to know if there is some sort of like you said, DIY sort of miracle, healing, grow, supplement aspect to what's happening here with Jesus. But I do think there is probably some it could be that there's some significance to that Jesus all throughout the book of John is making these I am statements about himself and equating and saying hey, I am I am Yahweh, I am God. And I do wonder if there's some significance here where it's you think about how is Adam formed? He's formed out of the dust of the earth, and here what Jesus does is he uses his own waters to water the dust of the earth and to provide sight for somebody to see. And so I maybe there's some parallels there. I don't know.
Yeah, and I certainly don't. I do know that there are times that there are details in the Bible that are shared that don't land with I'm okay, he did that. I'm thinking of the 10 plagues. It's okay, he decides you're first going to go with blood, and then there are frogs, and go through these plagues. And then I find out later that there were Egyptian gods. Mm-hmm. Either they were of frogs or their figure was a frog. And you know what I mean? So it's don't think for a minute that God doesn't have multiple levels going on here that would have clicked with them that don't with us. Mm-hmm. It seems, and I mean, that's the low hanging fruit on what perplexes me. But it is that part that it's like everybody treats it like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, he did that. Instead of the guy's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it is interesting to imagine because I don't know how much lag time there is between Jesus spitting in the ground, rubbing in his eyes, and the guy coming back. Like, I don't know how much time it takes for him to come back.
Right.
But yeah, like what's the response from the disciples as they ask him this question? Jesus shuts them down, rejects their framing of the question, and then immediately spits in the ground, rubs it in somebody's eyes, and walks away. If they are not picking up on whatever the significance of the reason that Jesus is doing this, then like that would just be so like awkward because like they don't go anywhere, right? They're not like they're waiting for him to come back, and there's no record. Maybe Jesus goes into some further teaching, or maybe he has some sort of something here that we don't get recorded. But yeah, that would be, and it would be incredibly awkward, and like I can't imagine how I would then go on to. There's so many moments in the ministry of Jesus where you're left like, are we not getting some sort of picture here that makes it less awkward, or is some of the point the awkwardness, the fact that we're not getting this stuff?
Yeah, and I think that I'm going to transition to what perplexes me. If he doesn't hear it, I don't know if it's worse or better, but it's perplexing why Jesus doesn't say, hey, buddy, would you like me to heal you? Or, hey, I'm going to heal you. Or, like, there's no direct word to the guy until after the mud's in his eyes, and he says, just go. And then afterward, and I think there's multiple things that perplex me about this, but I am also perplexed about that dynamic of him not hunting Jesus afterward. And I don't know if it's ever occurred to me like this, and this is not atypical. There's the story where Jesus heals 10 lepers and only one of them comes back to give him thanks. But with the blind guy especially, I would think I would be burning a path to the guy that did this, if for no other reason than to see the guy that did this. Sure. It's a curious thing to me, and I don't know. How does he say I don't know? Is he saying I don't know, or don't care, basically, or is he like, I don't know, I'd love to see him again, But there doesn't seem on this guy's part to be this strong desire. And now I'm thinking there's a lot of people that are healed that I'm sure they're grateful. I'm not even questioning them. But I think if you healed me, I would want to see you. I would want to talk to you more.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit perplexing about their response.
Well, then it makes me wonder, because like I think there's certainly part of this where Jesus is doing the healing of his sight, and then there's also speaking to what they would have considered the ritual impurity of this man's blindness, or which a lot of what the disciples are getting at in their question. And so Jesus sends him to be purified, and he's purified at the pool of Siloam, and he's also healed of his blindness. What I also like to give him dignity. I would like to think, like, if I had some sort of major illness that was healed by Jesus, like right now, like let's say I lost my eyesight, I'm blind for the next 5 years, and then Jesus comes and heals me. Like, yeah, I'm like, let me see whoever healed, let me see him. Mm-hmm. But like, if I had literally never seen like a thing in my life, imagine the sensory overload of like,
right.
You're in the middle of the day, and then all of a sudden light comes in the world.
That alone
would be absurd, and would be like, overwhelming to any individual person. So you want to give the dignity to be like, this is not somebody who lost his sight a week ago. This is somebody who has never seen another human face, who has never, been able to associate anything, with vision. And I assume he heard the last words that Jesus says, while I'm in the world, I'm the light of the world. And then he spits and he tells him to go, and he goes to the pool, he washes, and then suddenly, like, he's blinded by light. And so maybe there's a piece here. If I'm gonna get real spiritual woohooey here. That's the technical term for it.
Right.
But there's a sense in which it's like, okay, this is gonna be so silly. There's gonna be a version. There's a like 8 year, like, go back 8 years version Connor that would hear this and be like, oh my goodness, like, what a hippie, what a loser. But Jesus declares, I am the light of the world. And then this man goes to the pool and is now blinded for the first time by light. And then he seems kind of unconcerned with finding Jesus as quickly as possible. He's like, well, he said he's the light of the world. He's here. Like I'm blinded. All I can see, if Jesus is the light of the world, all I can see is light.
Yeah.
And so like part of me wonders, maybe there's something there, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, there's so many ways to go about that, but to really put yourself on in that situation, and I know I've seen videos of people not seeing for the first time, but like hearing for the first time because they have a cochlear implant or whatever, and just the look on their face, and their whole countenance, it is both amazing and full of potential and full of hope and scary and confusing and. Even the fact of discerning, is this what the people called a tree? Is this what the people call,
Sure.
There's so much would come up. So it is interesting, not so much this conversation, but the conversation will happen. All of a sudden he's thrown into this world of accusing and tension. And I would be like, if I was him, I'd be like, I can see,
So I think about this all the time. There's a guy I followed on a long time for YouTube, and he'll do these things where he'll talk. He was born blind, never seen a single thing in his life. And he'll like talk to people who like became blind later in life, and a lot of people who become blind later in life still have like visual memories and thoughts and visual like, they can imagine things in their head visually. But this guy, and I assume this is kind of a through line for most people born blind, has no reference for being able to like visually imagine something because he's never had vision in the first place. And so like the world, like it's not just, oh my gosh, all this light's coming in, this is wild, all the stimuli, but it's also like like he is never, like when he is alone and he's thinking through the world, he's not creating a map in his head when he's like hanging out begging. He is just like he's there. If he's processing it, he's not processing it in the same way that I would if I went blind tomorrow. And so much about how this guy views the world is so foreign. And not only like can he see for the first time, but like not only is he healed in this moment, but there is massive rewiring of how his brain works here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the way that builds to what will happen next, I'm looking forward to talking about that in relationship to this dynamic and how, man, there's not any part of this that's like, well, of course, it's a Tuesday. This is what happens here. I mean, it's all so weird. So what about for you? What perplexes you?
Sure. So in 3, Jesus says, neither this man nor his parents sinned. Said Jesus, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. And I think I want to understand fully what Jesus means by this, right? Because like not every blind person in the time of Jesus was healed, and not every sick person in the time of Jesus was healed. Not every person that had had an illness or had a disease or had an affliction put upon them was not seen by Jesus. And so like I get the sense Jesus would be like, I'm talking about this guy. Like you don't have to immediately jump to
right.
What, like I am talking to one person in time and space, and maybe there's some grander points for all of humanity, for other people with illness or sickness or disability, but yet my mind can't help but go there a little bit.
Yeah. On a lesser note, or maybe a less dramatic example, I had a guy ask me yesterday. He said, every bad thing that happens to you, is it a specific lesson from God? And he was like, so the person says, well, I need a patient, so God put me in a situation where I had to wait on something, And my take on that is no. I don't think that God's like, okay, I need you to learn. Let's take patience specifically. I need you to learn patience, so I'm going to put you in spaces where you have to wait. Number one, patience is a fruit of the Spirit, meaning it's something you receive from God. It's not something you create or earn, on your own. I also think that if that were the only truth, and I think what I guess I'm getting at is there's a deeper truth, but if it's the only truth, eventually you're going to get to a space where this lesson isn't worth it. Something bad enough will happen in your life, and you're like, I don't want to learn long suffering. I don't want to learn, this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so my response to this man was, every chance I think why God, number one, you're going to suffer. That's just, you're on earth, you're going to suffer. You don't get that choice. You do get a choice whether you'll suffer trusting God or not trusting God. But when you choose to trust God, something happens there. You receive the fruit of the Spirit. You receive growth, but the primary growth you're receiving in is how to trust God more, you know. And you start to process information. Subconsciously, you'll start to think, well, God led me through this, he'll lead me through that, you know. But this idea of everything needs to make sense to me, because that to me is the ultimate problem. It's like, until I figure out the lesson of this pain, then it doesn't count, or until I figure out the lesson, then it won't be over. Like, once I get the lesson, oh, now I understand patience, so now this pain will suddenly alleviate. Well, it's like, tell that to all the people that suffered their entire life, you know. And I think that's right here. I think, to me, it's cleaner and better application to say he's talking about this individual, not every single person that was born blind or any other, you know, malady that affects you.
There's an interesting way that Jesus words it that I don't know if I caught the first time, and I would have to go do some deep Greek study to get exactly what the translators are trying to get across here. But it says, but this happens so that the works of God might be displayed in him. And so that might word I want to go and do a little bit more work on. But it is interesting, especially thinking about like this man, if this man had just like, Jesus spits in his eyes and he says, hey, go to this pool, and the man then just like walks home, does he still end up healed? Does he not? You know, what, how much say, I offered up as a possibility that he had some work to do in his own healing. Jesus gave him work to do in his own healing. And so like, I do wonder if you were, I think you are right. This is about him, but if you were to extrapolate it out, like when we think about any of our own sufferings or any of our, any of our own maladies or whatever there would be, like they might be the works of God might end up being displayed in those things. And so I wonder, maybe there's some clunky English, Greek to English there. I don't know. But I just find myself stuck on that word.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And to make sure, I don't know, for what it's worth, to be clear, I think God will use every situation. I think it's also, I think it's incorrect to think, well, this is a situation that God would show himself because there's a crowd or because of some significance, you know. But I think there are tons of things that I think if we were walking with Jesus or in Jesus' vicinity that we might not notice that he does, that now that we look back, we're like, oh man, when he said this, that was really important, you know, but it didn't click with us for whatever reason. And so I do think that God is always, you know, it's like in Ephesians 2:10 where he says he prepares things in advance for us to participate in. And it's like, okay, so which things? And I'm like, I'm okay if it's 60% of the stuff. I'm also okay if it's 100% of the stuff, you know, because not because I need to think every single thing is just, you know, an appointment with God. Because I've been with people that, you know, think about this is an appointment with God. Well, how do you know that? Well, because something good happened. So what if something bad happened? Would that not be an appointment with God? And that's, you know, who's to say, you know, and that's kind of the point is, I think God will work through any situation. And I think our response needs to be, frame it how you will, you know, not my will, but yours be done, or yours be done, or here am I, send me. But that spirit of, I'm going to humble myself, do the best I know how in trusting you, and you'll choose whether lifting you up looks like this big deal and wow, all this glory, or if nobody notices at all.
You know, I love the picture and the idea. I love the picture and the idea of Jesus coming along and be like, yeah, you didn't pick up on it, but all throughout the Gospels and then stuff that wasn't even recorded, there are plenty of opportunities where people had to be healed like this man, but then they chose to walk away. They chose not to participate. And like, I obviously don't love the idea of that. But I do love that kind of, I don't know if it's counterfactual, but just that possibility, that like, does Jesus know for sure in this moment that this man is going to participate with him? Like, does Jesus know? Or, you know, Is he one of many? Is there a percentage of people that participate? Are there a percentage of people that outright reject it or get offended or get frustrated with Jesus because he did something gross or whatever?
Yeah.
I love the idea, and again, we can't say for sure, but I love the idea that has happened. That God was giving that possibility to all sorts of people during the ministry of Jesus, and we know that there are many more stories of people probably like this that we don't get, but also the idea of the significance of including the story of this is somebody who chose to participate, and so I feel okay about that. But is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Well, I think in general there's a tendency in our lives to say, well, certainly God's not going to do this, I mean, unless you're just always in front of a body of water and like, well, he parted it before, kind of thing. The vast majority of time, I think our lives feel very unspiritual, uneventful. Like there's not a lot of glory in this, kind of thing. And I think, again, this guy, it was just another day, and there's this common living life, and then everything changes. And I think that's really important, especially to hold on to when we get into the tense points. We're not to the tension in the story yet, but I do think that's really important to think, man, I'm not going to limit God and say how he's going to do this, and so I just want to be open to it.
Absolutely. Grace, peace, and love.